shopping apps and food delivery apps and all of these other things on my phone, in my pocket at all times, was the root of my internet addiction, truly. And so I decided to get 2 phones. Now, I wouldn't have done this if being on the internet, on Instagram, on YouTube, on all these things wasn't my job. A big part of my job is being on the internet, right? If I was not in a career where being on the internet made sense, I would not have done that. I took a slightly different approach than I would maybe recommend to somebody who is not in my position. However, I'm going to explain what I did first and then explain what I would recommend second. So let's start with what I did. So I decided to get 2 phones so that one phone could be my day-to-day phone, and then one phone could be basically my social media bad phone. Basically, I've named both devices. One phone is named good phone, and one phone is named bad phone. You know how you can name your phone or whatever? I've named them that. The goal of the 2 separate phones was having one phone that just has all the things I need for day to day, like apps that I use for work, whether it's like email apps or document apps or Dropbox or WeTransfer, all these different, work-related apps. And then I have obviously all of the great things that come with the iPhone, such as the maps and obviously iMessage and FaceTime and all of these different things. And then I have some travel apps like, Uber and things like Venmo and stuff like that are on there. And then I have one entertainment page on my phone where I have Spotify for music and podcasts and audiobooks and stuff like that. And then I have the book app that comes with the iPhone. And then I have a dictionary app. And then I have Goodreads so that I can track the books that I read. That's pretty much it for my entertainment page. All I can really do is listen to music, listen to podcasts, listen to audiobooks. That's pretty much, or I guess look up words in the dictionary if I'm bored. And then last but not least, I have a health page, which is like, all of the apps for all the workout classes that I go to. Also, the apps that I use to book reservations at restaurants. And then I have Yelp that helps me find restaurants in my area. So it's kind of like food and health page. So notice I don't have any food delivery apps. I don't have any shopping apps like Amazon or whatever. I don't have any of that. I don't even have Pinterest on this phone. It's all stuff that's healthy and inspires me to get out into the world and do things. There's nothing on there that makes me want to sit and scroll. Oh, and then on the other phone, I basically have all of the things I need for social media stuff, like all my different editing apps and like stuff that I use to make, I don't know, like even like YouTube thumbnails, like all those different apps that I use to edit things. I have all the social media apps on there. And then I also do have food delivery apps on there as well, just because like if I'm ever home and like maybe I'm having a bunch of friends over, I'll go and grab that phone and order dinner. Like it's not like I'm never going to order food delivery or Postmates ever again, like whatever, but it's not on my main phone. Now, I know what you're thinking. Emma, why did you need 2 phones for this? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, you can just go and use that phone whenever you want to order something on Postmates or go on social media. How the fuck is this going to work? I asked myself the same thing. And honestly, that was a risk when I went into this, buying 2 phones. And how am I going to ensure that I don't abuse the second phone? But what I found so far is that it's actually very easy not to go use that phone and abuse it because, number one, I put it in an inconvenient location, charging in a corner of my office. Like it's not in my eye line. Okay. So I don't really think about this phone very often. Unless I have a photo to post on Instagram or something, I'm not really thinking about this phone. The phone that's in my pocket is the phone that's like on the forefront of my mind. Like it's the one that I'm using. And when you don't see the Instagram app, when you don't see the TikTok app, when you don't see the YouTube app, you almost forget about it. And you're working with what you have on the phone that you have. And so I've actually had no issues with going and abusing that phone, but it has been very helpful for those moments when I'm like, oh, I'm going to post something on Instagram now. I'm going to go and get my phone and do that. Or, oh, I'm going to go, I don't know, like make a YouTube video public using the app instead of like using my computer. Like it's nice that it's there and it's just quick and easy to do it. So it's been very helpful, but I haven't abused it yet. The other reason why I'm confident that I'm not going to abuse it, is that I made this phone very challenging to use for anything other than posting on social media or, I guess, ordering food delivery. Like, I have removed all of the apps that you need for a phone. Like, for example, calling, texting, email, maps, weather. I've removed all of those from the home screen so that I'm not going to end up taking this phone and like carrying it around. And then last but not least, I now have 2 phone numbers. One, which I can give out, more liberally, I guess, to people who are, maybe just acquaintances, somebody I'm not close to, or like when I'm at a store and they're like, hey, can you give me your phone number? I can give them that phone number. And then I obviously have now a new phone number that's very private that only my friends and family have. So on a day-to-day basis, only my friends and family can reach out to me on this new phone that has only healthy apps on it. And I'm not being bombarded by messages from people who I'm not really close to. That was also something that used to stress me out, was, constantly feeling like I needed to be available to everyone at all times. That's sort of been relieved by the fact that majority of people who have my number have my old number, and now my new number is reserved for people who I'm really close to. Everyone else gets shot to that other phone, the bad phone as we call it, and I can respond to it leisurely when I'm checking that phone once every few days. I've so far really loved this experience. Like, I literally have not gone on social media, like scrolled around in quite a while now. Like, the only time I've gone on social media was because somebody was like, hey, you should check this out. And my brain feels so much calmer. And I do feel more creative. I do feel more inspired. I do feel more productive. And this doesn't feel unsustainable to me. Like, this is the first thing that I've done where I've been like, yeah, I actually think I can sustain this. Like, all of the challenges that I was experiencing with overstimulation, lack of creativity, lack of productivity, disconnect between myself and, my spirit and my brain. And I've felt relief from all of that. And I've also felt a lot more positive in general. Like, my outlook on life has just felt so much more positive. And people that maybe I used to stalk on social media who I don't really know anymore or I'm not really close to anymore, like, not seeing what they're up to has been such a relief, like such a cleansing experience. There's just so many great things to it. And then not having food delivery on my phone, I've not ordered food delivery in weeks now. I don't even remember the last time I ordered food delivery. I've been going out to restaurants a little bit more, eating at places like Erewhon that have like a hot bar and, you can sit outside and have your hot bar meal. I've been cooking a lot more. Yeah, this has just been a great experience. And listen, again, I went an extreme route by getting 2 phones. I don't necessarily think that will work for everyone. I think that's excessive for some people, and I completely get it. And I think there's so many other ways to do it. I just recently did an interview with a delightful woman, and I was talking to her about social media addiction, and she was saying that she deletes social media apps every time. Like, okay, so she'll post something on social media and then directly after delete the app. And then she'll basically re-download it every single time that she wants to use it. I don't know if that would work for me because I would fear that I just wouldn't delete it. And psychologically for me, I just don't think that would work, but that works for her. So that could work for you possibly. Like, another option is to use another device that you have, whether that's an old iPhone or an iPad or a computer, even a laptop, using only those devices for scrolling through social media and stuff like that, and not having the app on your phone. The only problem is you can't upload onto Instagram using your computer. Like, you can only scroll. And then for some of you, it might make sense to just delete them all together. Like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, I want to go cold turkey and I just want to not even have these things in my life anymore. And I think that's a great solution as well. But either way, I think removing the addicting pieces from your pocket is an unbelievably effective method. And I think it's been the most effective method that I've tried so far. I don't know. I just think that my life has really become more beautiful since. I'm like playing board games and doing puzzles and all these things. And I'm listening to a lot of music. Like, I'm discovering a lot of new music to keep it fresh. I'm discovering new podcasts and stuff, or at least trying to. And I just think overall it's been a really great experience and I really, really recommend it. It's been life-changing and I feel for the first time ever, I feel free. Like, I really do feel free from the addiction. Did I have a moment of withdrawal? Yes. Less than I expected, though. Like, I found that, a lot of the moments when I would normally go and scroll on social media, I end up just sort of sitting in silence in a way that's not really even noticeable. Like, for example, at the grocery store or at the dentist office when I'm like waiting in line or waiting for it to be my turn. A lot of times I used to go on social media in those moments. I either just people watch or zone out and think about something, or if I'm really like for some reason in the mood for entertainment, I'll open up my book app, and I love reading books on my phone. It's actually very pleasant, so I'd recommend that. I haven't really had any withdrawals there. When I'm eating, I think I've had a few moments where I've been like, dang, it'd be nice to watch something. But I'll either just eat in silence or eat while listening to music or eat while reading, which is something I've loved doing recently. Like, just eat and read a book. I mentioned that in my last episode, how much I love that. So that hasn't been too bad. I've definitely been getting bored when I've been working out. I've been working out on my own recently. I've stopped going to workout classes as often, and I do a lot of solo workouts. And I kind of miss watching YouTube videos while I'm doing cardio, but I force myself to just listen to music and use that time to brainstorm various things, and that's actually been very, very helpful. I think the thing I miss the most is actually watching YouTube all the time, like constantly consuming YouTube. I almost miss that more than scrolling through social media. I don't really miss that as much. I think that I sort of have a little fear of missing out. Like, oh my God, what's everyone posting? Like, I want to know. But then very quickly I'm like, I don't need to look right now. And then I get over it and forget. So the withdrawal symptoms have like not been that bad. I did have a few days, especially in the beginning, where I did feel like this eerie silence almost in my life. Like, it was almost like things were too calm, too quiet, the pace was almost so slow. It was like jarring for me, and that kind of caused me a bit of anxiety, but that passed very quickly. Overall, it's been phenomenal. So listen, take my experience, analyze it, and do what you will with it. We're all different, and what makes sense for us is all different, and figure out what works for you. But I definitely think that everyone could benefit from finding their method of balance when it comes to the internet. And I think it's not a waste of time. It's not just like, like a silly overreaction about the impact that the internet has. It is absolutely not that. I can tell you there is a sharp increase in my quality of life since I've taken the internet and removed it from my pocket. I wish you luck on your journey. And that's all I have for today. I hope that you enjoyed this. And, maybe this will be one of the last conversations I have about internet addiction, because maybe this is the time that I actually get. Hello, and welcome back to Advice Session, a series here on Anything Goes, where you send in your current dilemmas or anything that you want advice on, and I give you my unprofessional advice. And let me reiterate, very unprofessional advice, and I recommend that you take all of it with a grain of salt. With that being said, today we are going to be covering trust issues and boundaries in romantic relationships. I've compiled a list of current dilemmas and current challenges that you, the listener, are facing in your relationships right now. And I'm going to give you my advice, my unprofessional advice, very unprofessional. So let's begin. Somebody said, I have trust issues even though my partner gives me nothing to worry about. How do I fix this? I understand this because I also have my own slew of trust issues. I have never really officially been cheated on. I can't confirm that I've been lied to. No, that's not true. I actually can confirm that. I have been lied to quite a bit in my past. And over, the last few years, I've developed quite a few trust issues just from bad experiences in dating. I feel like what happens in relationships is that something goes wrong, like someone cheats or someone lies or someone loses feelings or whatever it may be. And the experience is so scarring, I think, because romantic relationships are so emotional and so deeply felt that anything that happens in them is tattooed in the brain of who experienced it permanently, because it's so deeply emotional And it's so, I don't even know, guttural. Like the whole experience is just so vivid, that you just never forget. And so bad experiences in romantic relationships seem to feel permanent in the brain because of how severely emotional the experience is. So it makes sense that we tend to hold on to these bad past experiences and take them into our next ones because we don't want to make the same mistake again. It's like when you're a kid and you touch the stove and you find out that it's hot, then you never want to touch the stove again. But the difference between learning that the stove is hot by burning your hand on it and learning that potential future partners are bad because you had a bad experience with one of them is that stoves are always hot, whereas people are all very different. Now, there is something to be said for patterns in humans, right? Like, it's not like it's rare for humans to cheat on each other in monogamous relationships. It happens quite a bit. So, it's hard to rationalize the fact that the next person that you date won't be that way. It's safer and in some ways more obvious to say, you know what, this is my new default. I just believe I'm always going to be cheated on. But the truth is that every stove is hot and not every person is terrible. And I think in some ways, in order to manage trust issues, you have to go into new relationships with the mindset innocent until proven guilty. I don't know if I mean that. That's a bit too extreme. I think it's more like innocent until your gut tells you otherwise, or until proven guilty. Because there's also something to be said for dating somebody and your trust issues sort of acting up for a genuinely valid reason. For example, let's say you and your ex had a very beautiful relationship up until your ex stopped responding to your texts during the day. Like they just started ignoring you during the day when you both were at work. And then a few months after that sort of began, you found out that your partner was cheating on you. Now, when you don't get responded to during the day, that's going to remind you of when you were being cheated on. So anytime your new partner doesn't respond to your text during the day, you're like, wait, what does this mean? It's not completely irrational to be like, well, this happened last time. This might mean that it's happening again. Like this, my partner has stopped responding to me during the day. The last time this happens, I got cheated on. Could this be happening again? Like to me, that's rational. And in that case, you need to bring that up to your partner and have a conversation and say, this is making me really uncomfortable. The last time this happened to me, I was being cheated on, And so you can't completely ignore your trust issues because sometimes they're actually acting as a protection for you because you learned something the hard way last time. I think when it becomes a problem is when, similar to the situation that we're discussing right now, trust issues come up and start to cause issues even when the new partner is not giving you anything to worry about. And I think the best way to combat this is to, number one, communicate your trust issues with your partner. I've done this many times before where I've explained to my new partner, hey, these are all the things that have happened to me in my past that have made it really hard for me to trust in relationships. Now, because of all of these things, I need extra reassurance in these areas. Now, it sounds so like borderline therapy speak to talk about these things in this way, but I do it because I find it to be crucial that my new partner understands where I've been scarred so that we have an open dialogue about things so that when my trust issues do act up, I can be like, hey, my trust issues are acting up because you're doing this. I know it's irrational. I know nothing's probably wrong, but I'm going to need a little bit more support in this way to make me feel better. And you would be shocked at how that open dialogue helps soothe those trust issues in a very powerful way. But I also think another half the battle is on one's own. If you're struggling with trust issues, a lot of it is just negative
To
thoughts
lower down the thoughts.
repeating and swirling around your brain over and over again because you don't know how to stop them. And this applies also to other anxious thoughts that are irrational. You have to learn how to control them. And to be honest, I'm still working on that. If I had it all figured out, I would not have as bad of anxiety as I have.
Let's do
But
this.
I think something that can be really helpful, and it sounds dumb, but stop calling dumb. Or it wasn't her idea. She read it in an anxiety management book somewhere. But to close your eyes and imagine a stop sign when you're spiraling with these negative thoughts. Give your brain a second to breathe. And then you can figure out a way to let it out. Okay? Write it down in a journal. Call a close family member or friend. And get it out of your head. Discuss your fears. Discuss the worst case scenario. Get it all off your chest. And then now that it's all out there in the world, it's either on a piece of paper or it's come out of your mouth and been received by somebody else's ear, now you're able to work on it. Now you're able to tangibly touch it. It's not really tangible, I guess, still, but it feels more tangible. And from there, you can do a few things. Number one, you can figure out a plan on how to make yourself feel better, whether that's having a conversation with your partner or, maybe distracting yourself with things like meditating or exercise or reading or working on something in these moments when you start to spiral, figuring out what you want your distraction to be in these moments when you're spiraling. Or you can choose to accept the fact that the worst case scenario might come true and that you might have to deal with that. But until it happens, you can't be worried about it. You can do a few of those, you can do all three of those. I think ideally you can do all three of those. But those are the best tactics that I know. And I'm hesitant to say this because I don't know if it's my own personal experience.
And then turn left.
So I don't know if it's great advice. But I do want to tell you a story of something that's happened to me. I'm somebody who dates a lot. Not like a lot, but I'm always in a relationship. I feel like for the past few years I've been in relationships and not even on purpose. Like I'm not even trying to do that, but it just the way that my life has unfolded, I've just, dated a lot over the last few years. In like pretty serious relationships, I've had quite a few. And I've noticed something over the course of my dating experiences, which is if you're dating somebody who you know really loves you, and you can feel that in every cell in your body, that person loves you and adores you, the trust issues are gone. Now, this is something that I've experienced. Now, I don't want to say it's going to work for everyone, but I know a lot of us like to bark up the wrong tree. And Lord knows I've barked up the wrong trees, okay, before. We barked up some great trees. I barked up some trees that were pretty good, but not quite right for me. I barked up a lot of bad trees, okay? And you know what I've noticed? When I try to create a healthy relationship with somebody who doesn't truly care for me as much as I care for them, which I've done a lot, the trust issues are all over. Because I don't trust them. I don't feel like they're all in. I constantly feel like I'm trying to win them over because they're like either playing hard to get with me, even though we're already dating, or they're just genuinely not as into me as I am into them. And that makes the trust issues 50 times worse. And, with a partner like that, you can communicate with them and say, hey, these are my trust issues. I really am going to need extra reassurance. And it can help, let's say, 60%. But that last 40% comes down to the chemistry of the relationship, I think, at least in my experience. And if you don't feel like your partner is obsessed with you, loves you, is all in for you, and you have trust issues, you will continue, I think, to have trust issues. That's my experience. Because I just, dating somebody who actually really likes you is not always hot to people. In the past, I've sought out guys who honestly didn't really like me that much. I thought that was hot. I used to be very attracted to guys that were hard to get, guys that I was constantly having to win over. And you want to know what that did to me? It made me a miserable mess. And what's interesting is, in retrospect, I think some of those relationships, the guys actually did like me just as much as I liked them, if not even more. at times, but they were playing hard to get, and that was hot to me. And I was like, ooh, that's hot. But guess what it led me to? Chaos in my mind. Being in a relationship with somebody who can share the way that they feel about you, are an open book with you, it's like almost like the golden ticket for people who have trust issues, because it really just helps them dissolve. I don't know. I think a lot of times too, we're like, well, our partner is not giving us any obvious reason to have trust issues, but yet we still have them. Be critical. Be very critical and ask yourself, is this person giving me the amount of reassurance that I need naturally? Like, are they showering me with the amount of love and reassurance and admiration that I need to feel comfortable in a relationship? Ask yourself that. Don't ask yourself if they're giving you any obvious signs, because the answer is no if there's no issues in the relationship, right? If you still have trust issues, I would suggest that you look a bit deeper, because in the past I've been in relationships that were very similar. My trust issues were activated, but yet there were no obvious issues. And you know what I wasn't doing? I wasn't asking myself, is this person making me feel loved enough on a daily basis? The answer was no. But that doesn't mean that they were doing anything wrong. It just means that they weren't doing enough. And I needed more. So, with all that being said, I think there's two main takeaways here. Number one, if you're in a relationship with somebody, things are going great, but you still have trust issues, really, really, really analyze this relationship and figure out if it's because your partner does not make you feel loved enough, and you don't trust them because they're not open enough with you, and you don't have this super vulnerable, raw connection. Maybe there's some walls up, making you feel a little bit disconnected, which then is triggering the trust issues. Really analyze even the healthiest of relationships to see if that's triggering your trust issues. But then also have that conversation with your partner, explain to them where you're at, and then do the work on your own. That's where I'm at with that. Okay, moving on. Somebody said, my boyfriend holds resentment about relationships I had before I even met him. How do I handle it? This to me is a conversation first. Like, nothing can be done before a conversation is had. No choices can be made before a conversation is had. I think you need to sit your boyfriend down. I think you need to say, it's very upsetting to me that you are basically holding my life before you against me. And you say something like this, there is nothing I can do to change my past. The people that I've been with, the things that I've done are all in the past. I cannot change them. So you either need to accept me for who I am and trust that I am the person that you know today. I'm not the person I was back then. I mean, I am, but I'm also not. You know, I've grown a lot since then, and I've evolved a lot since then, and I'm not with any of those people anymore. I'm with you now. I'm a new person in a lot of ways today. You have to either choose to accept that as the truth, or we can't be together, because it is never going to change. What is already done will never change. The only thing that we can control is what we strive for moving forward. That's it. So I don't know what to tell you. And this could go a number of ways. Your partner could say, yeah, you know what, I completely understand. Like, I'm sorry, I'm just jealous, or I don't like the way that you behaved in those relationships, or you dated my friend and it's just so close to home, but at the same time, I love you and I want to be with you. And so I'm really going to work on moving past it. Okay, great. That might solve everything. It also might not. Your partner might respond that way and then a month later get all butthurt again about it. In which case, I actually would recommend breaking up. If somebody cannot accept your past, you cannot be with them. Point blank. Because you cannot change the past. If somebody doesn't like some of your current behaviors, like for example, they don't like the way that you do the dishes, or they don't like the way you're outgoing at parties, those are things happening in the present. So those conversations can happen now. And, you know, you can either come to a compromise or ultimately decide that, you know, your partner needs to accept those things about you. It's just different because it's current, right? Like there is some malleability there. Like you can make a compromise and change your behavior moving sacrificing the integrity of who you are, there are sometimes moments when sacrifices need to be made and compromises need to be made. And I think that that's fine, but there's no doing that with your past. It is just simply your past. And I've actually dated people in the past where I felt that they were so judgmental that I was afraid of them knowing about my past. Like who I'd hooked up with before. In fact, I've even dated people. Oh my God. I've dated people where I had hooked up with people that they hate, and they never found out about that because I was too afraid to tell them, because I was like, they're gonna judge me and they're not going to. They will break up with me if they find out that I hooked up with this person one time, or well, maybe four. And I guess the other response that your partner might give you in this conversation, where you basically say, "This is who I am. You have to accept it." They also might say, "Okay, this is not going to work then," and then you might have to break up. And you know what? You don't want to be with anyone in this life who does not accept you for who you truly are, who you fully are. Anytime you have to keep secrets or tell half-truths, no. You can't live like that. And there are people out there that are going to accept you for exactly who you are. In fact, I've also had relationships where I've been with people where I'm like, this is everything that's ever happened in my entire life. This is every single piece of my personality. This is everything that I am. Here it is. Take it or leave it. And that's been welcomed with open arms as well. So I've had both experiences in my life, and I can tell you that it is possible to find somebody that you can be fully open with, who has the maturity to say, you know what, I don't love that you did this in your past, but also you're a different person now. You've grown up. You wouldn't do that again. You know? I don't know. All right. Moving on. Next. Somebody said, how do I express a need for personal space from my partner without hurting their feelings? I think that there's a few ways to do it. I mean, obviously communication is always
Go straight
ideal, right? To just casually bring it up to them one day. You know, I feel like I'm always with you and I love spending time with you, but at the same time, I feel like I need to be alone sometimes, or else I'm not going to have any independent thought. Like I'm constantly around you and I love being around you, but I think I need more alone time to make sure that I can maintain my sense of self in a way. Like it has nothing to do with hang out with you all the time if I could, but I just think that I need that. That's one way of doing it, where you're sort of letting the blow be soft on them and you're making it more about you and trying to maintain your sense of self, and almost making it sort of about having discipline and balance in your life, less about them being smothering or whatever with you, right? Another thing you can do is just tell them that you're busy more often, or if you live with them, you know, leave the house more often and say that you need to do certain
Keep
things
right,
more.
and then
It
turn
comes down
right.
to sort of making plans that don't involve them. So for example,
Turn right.
maybe you want to go to a pottery class by yourself. Just don't invite them and go and do that on your own, and you have full right to do that. When they text you and ask you if you want to hang out, you just say, you know what, tonight, like I really need to get this done, or I really need to do that, or you know, you can sort of just naturally create space by keeping yourself busy with things that don't involve them. Now, the only challenge with this is that they might start to feel you pulling back, and it might be upsetting for them, in which case they might start to act upset, or you know, they might start to create resentment, which usually you can feel, and you're gonna have to say, hey, I can tell that you
Keep
know,
right,
I've been
and then turn right.
myself, that I can tell it's making you angry or upset. Here's why I'm doing
Turn
it. It has
right.
nothing to do with Crystal or Crystal. I just need this. I really do think the ideal thing is to have a conversation about it and just keep it light. Like it doesn't need to be that deep or that serious. But what you have to prepare yourself for is the fact that you might still hurt their feelings. Like I've dated very avoidant people in my past. Not all.
Keep
I
right.
dated a few avoidant people who really didn't want to hang out that often. I've also dated the opposite. I've dated people who want to hang out all the time. And through my experience with dating people who are avoidant and don't want to hang out very often, I've sort of grown a thick skin. Like I understand how to manage that, and I don't really take it super personally. But your partner might not have that that you're noticing it now.
Exactly.
Like it's way better
Right.
to notice it now than to realize it after the fact and be like, I'm all alone because I've relied on my significant other for every ounce of support for the last however amount of time. And now we're
ready
broken up
to
and I'm
turn
alone
left.
because I cut everyone else off. And I think that can happen sometimes because the relationship is genuinely toxic. I also
Turn
think it can
left.
happen because you just like each other so much. I think,
That's
you know,
very
it can go either way. What I would recommend is number one, find a group of friends that is your group of friends. You can meet those friends from trying a pottery class or going to a Pilates class and meeting people. Like, just start putting yourself out there in areas that your boyfriend would want to join you. You know, it could be anything, but get yourself out there doing activities that he would maybe be interested in. And then try to make friends that way. I think having a separate group of friends is very helpful. And that can be really challenging to develop and can take time. You know, my example of like going to Pilates classes or, you know, taking a pottery class and meeting people that way, that can work. It also might not work. It's so challenging to make friends at times, but it's something to strive for. So that's number one. Number two, I sort of just mentioned this, but doing activities by yourself. Maybe make a goal for yourself. Like, I want to do 5 activities a week by myself without my boyfriend. So maybe 2 of those days it's going to a workout class, and then 2 other of those days it's going grocery shopping alone, and then one day it's going to pottery class. Okay, you see what I'm saying? So start to create goals. Like, I'm going to do this many things alone per week. And then from there, I think you can really begin to build this life that exists parallel to your boyfriend, but not
At the
including
roundabout,
him.
take the second
And
exit.
that might mean that you don't spend as much time with your boyfriend as you used to. That might mean that sometimes you
Exit
miss him
now.
and you wish you were together and you're not. But it's so important to have a life outside of your relationship that is fulfilling, that it's worth those challenges. So we said, thoughts on love bombing. And how can you tell it's happening? I think love bombing is, well, I think it's complicated. Like, I'd like to believe that some people love bomb because they're just so excited about being in a new relationship that they just can't contain themselves and they just have so much love to share that they just want to express it. I would say for the most part, love bombing is used as a manipulation tactic to get somebody in the door and get somebody really emotional and get people's walls down. And the reason why I think it's more often used as a manipulation tactic is because I think that when you genuinely, deeply are in love with someone in the beginning phases, you're so afraid of making the other person uncomfortable, of making them feel smothered, forcing things, that you tend to be tactful about the way that you express your affection for the other person. Whereas when you don't really care and you're trying to date somebody for some sort of ulterior motive, you don't really care as much. You're not being as tactful. You're not being as careful. You're more likely to
Go
love bomb.
straight on.
So that's why I'm a bit skeptical about love bombing. Like, do I think that there are times that people love bomb on accident just because they're so excited and they're just confident by nature? Yes, but in my experience, anytime I've been love bombed, I think I fear I was being conned a bit and that they were just trying to like lock me in so that they could maybe use me in some ways. So I don't love bombing.
Oh,
I don't think it's great
factual.
practice in general. Like, even if you really, really, really like somebody, I don't think love bombing is ever the answer. I think love bombing should be avoided at all costs. I think you can tell it's happening when it feels off. Like, obviously at some point in the beginning of a relationship, you have to express your feelings for one another. I think love bombing tends to come about at an abnormal time. Like, for example, let's say you've been on one date, and all of a sudden, they're like, you're the most amazing person I've ever met. You're unbelievable. Like, I want to meet your family. And it's like, well, we've been on one date. Like, what are you talking about? Whereas if somebody's saying that 6 months into a relationship, like, that is not love bombing. It's like, no, you know each other well enough. Like, you've been dating for 6 months. If you are starting to feel like you want to marry the person, it's like, that's kind of valid. I feel like love bombing tends to be more chaotic and more like impulsive feeling. Like, you can feel your partner's impulsivity.
Get ready to
Love
turn
bombing.
left.
You're like, wow, they just feel like they're like also if their words don't match their actions. Like if they're saying, "Oh, you're my soulmate. I want to marry you," blah blah blah, and then like you look at their phone and you're like, "Is that another girl?" Like I don't know. If their words don't match their actions, like, "Oh my God, you're my soulmate. I'm in love with
Wait,
you.
this
You're
is the
perfect,"
right side,
but then they like
left side.
won't talk to you for like a week. It's like if I was your soulmate and you loved everything about me, you would be talking to me every day. A lot of it comes down to gut. Like I've been love bombed,
Keep right. And then turn
remember I
right.
was love bombed over text once. And I remember like I liked this person, so I was excited. But then
Turn
they were
right.
like confessing their love for me in a way that to me I was like, you don't even know me that well. Like, what do you mean? You like really are in love with me? Like it
Get
felt
ready to turn
a little
left.
weird, and I remember like enjoying it. I was like, wow, I'm happy to hear this. This is great news.
Turn
But I was
left.
also kind of like, this feels off in my gut. And, I proceeded to date that person. It's not like it didn't stop me. And I'm glad it didn't in retrospect
We are
because
finished.
I think with all relationships, including all of the failed ones, you always learn something. So no regrets. However, yeah, like I think that was a sign that they were maybe in it with me for the wrong reasons. They were just trying to lock me in because I think that they saw me as, I don't know, maybe more of just a public figure in a way than a person. I think that was intriguing. They love bombed me not because they loved me, but because they wanted a piece of me. And that is dark energy. Anyways, so I really do say like rely on your gut when it comes to love bombing because you can feel it being off. And in addition to that, use your logical mind as well. Does it make sense to be saying the type of things that are being said at this point in the relationship, etc., etc.? All right, last but not least, somebody said, I feel really embarrassed because I feel like people never want to date me. They only want to hook up. Is there something wrong with me? What do I do? Well, for one, I think it cannot be overlooked that societally and culturally, we live in hookup culture era. Like, you're not the only one, okay? There are so many people struggling to find people to date because it's very popular to not commit to things and to sort of have a more, I don't know, just like a more flexible dating life. And listen, that works for some people, rock on. But if you are not like that, I can understand your frustration because it's just harder to find than ever. In fact, I can relate to that because I am also somebody who really likes to date. I prefer to date than to be single and like hook up with people random. And it just doesn't work for me. And I've tried it and I've hated it and whatever. So I've tended to date more. Even if it's like really short, I'd rather try to see if dating would work and then throw it out after a short amount of time than just like hook up with people with no end game plan, you know? I like to sort of, I don't know, it's just who I am. So I understand the frustration because we don't necessarily live in a time where that is the standard anymore, you know? So I would say don't blame yourself because I think this is a broader societal thing that a lot of people are dealing with. But there are some other things that I think you can do. Number one, pay attention to who you're hanging out with. If you're hanging out in groups of people who are in the habit of hooking up with people on a consistent basis and not dating anyone, and that's sort of the culture of the group that you're in, the group that you're hanging around in, that might be a sign that you should explore other groups of people because a lot of times we tend to have these like micro cultures in the different groups that we hang out in. And, you might be hanging out in one where everybody just hooks up with each other and they don't date. So pay attention to that. But also, in some ways, you could kind of go on strike, okay, in a way, and be like, I'm not going to hook up with anyone. If you want to hook up with me, you have to date me. That's it. And that can be a bummer, and that might not work because I think, at times, you're like, well, I want to date somebody, but in the meantime, I also want to hook up with people. I get that desire as well, but I do think that if somebody really wants to hook up with you and you say no, you're like, I'm not doing that right now. Like, really just want to find somebody to date. I'm just not playing around with this shit anymore. You'd be shocked at how many people come around. You're like, do you want to go on a date then? And who knows what that could turn into. So there's something to be said for going on strike a little bit and saying, I'm not hooking up with kids. And that can be incredibly effective. Take some time to see the turnover of like people who are like, you know what? All right, I won't hook up with you then, but I'll take you on a date. And, that could be really delightful. And I think that that's it. But just remember that it's not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you. I think it's a combination of society and culture today and also the micro sort of culture that you're existing in. And there it is. So, okay, that was my advice session for today. I hope that you enjoy.
We back. Wait a minute. Let's go. Let me start the pod.
I hate to dampen the mood already. There was a time when super short jean shorts that you enjoyed my advice, my unprofessional advice. And if you did, feel free to submit your current dilemmas or things. This episode. Welcome back to Advice Session, a series here on Anything Goes where you send in your current dilemmas or anything that you want advice on, and I give you my unprofessional advice. And today we're going to be talking about inner turmoil. All of the dilemmas that I picked relate in some way to inner turmoil, inner struggles that are usually dealt with on one's own. There's a lot of challenges that we face that feel like our own personal battle, like they're only impacting us directly. They're personal issues, and it's challenging to talk about personal issues sometimes because a lot of us feel ashamed about making our personal challenges other people's problem. We don't want to burden anyone else with our own inner turmoil. But I think that that's why it's so important to talk about, because a lot of the dilemmas that we're going to discuss are things that people tend to keep to themselves. It's one thing to have a problem with somebody else or with something else. It's almost easier at times to have challenges that include an outside source because there's something to blame and there's a clear solution a lot of times. Like, oh, this person is causing issues in my life. Okay, I'm going to cut them out. They're done. And that comes with its own slew of pain and upset, but at least you can pinpoint easily what the issue is. Or if you're like, oh, this workout class is not fun for me. I dread it and I don't want to go to it anymore. Okay, I'm not going to go to it anymore. Like when you have an issue with something that's outside of yourself, it's a lot easier to pinpoint and it's a lot easier to communicate and it's much less daunting. When a challenge only involves you, it's a battle against yourself. And not only is that challenging to pinpoint at times, but it's also challenging to talk about. Because unlike an issue that involves another person, you can't just go to that person and communicate about it with them and solve the issue. It's a matter of communicating with yourself. And that is a far more challenging experience. And it can be helpful when having inner turmoil to talk to a loved one, talk to a therapist. But that at times can be intimidating as well because we can almost gaslight ourselves into thinking that our own personal issues don't deserve attention. So, with all that being said, let's dive in. So, somebody said, how do I stop taking everything so personal? Does this stem from insecurity? I've noticed in myself that I tend to take things the most personally when I am insecure, when I'm not feeling confident in myself in one way or another. When you're feeling confident in yourself, people can say whatever about you, and you don't give a fuck because your views, your beliefs about yourself are so deeply ingrained in you at that moment that you almost have this protective shield around you. Your views about yourself are unable to be shaken, and people giving you shit or criticizing you in some way just doesn't bother you. But when you are insecure, it is impossible to protect yourself from things that might sting a little bit. You know, you don't have that protective aura around you. You don't have that shield around you. I think a lot of times with behavioral issues that we're dissatisfied with, there's usually a root cause that is not obvious. And this is a great example of that. You're taking things really personally because your self-esteem is low, because you're in an insecure period of your life. But those two things don't obviously connect. That's why I think it's so challenging to solve these personal issues, because it's not an obvious cause and effect. I mean, once you recognize the pattern it is, but before that, it's not at all obvious. So here's what I would recommend to do, and this is what I have done in the past when I've noticed that I'm clearly a little bit insecure. I'm going through a phase where my self-esteem is low, and it's starting to bleed into my social life in the way where I'm getting offended or my feelings hurt very easily because I don't have that protective shield around me that comes with having a solid sense of myself and a strong self-esteem. Number one, it's important to try to be proud of yourself as a person, okay? Not in your work, not in how athletic you are, not in anything sort of surface level like that, but rather be proud of yourself as just a human being. That's something that I really lean into when I'm in a phase where my self-esteem is low. It's so easy to just be really nice, to be even nicer, even more generous, even more kind than you already are. And I found in my experience that being proud of who you are as a person is one of the most fulfilling ways of building self-esteem. And it's also one of the most sustainable because no matter what happens, you can always do that. It's free. Being a good person in your eyes is quite literally free. You don't necessarily need to be donating thousands of dollars, hundreds of dollars even, to a charity. You don't need to be, I mean, it's great to do that, sure, but you don't have to do that to be a good person. You can do it for free by being polite to your waitress who serves you dinner when you're out at a restaurant, by texting your friends and checking in on them and making sure that they're doing well, by calling your parents and giving them an extra hour of your week. You know, there's so many different ways that you can do it, but that goes a very long way, at least in my personal experience.
Okay.
But then on top of that,
Here
I
we
think
go.
having discipline with yourself is also important when it comes to getting work done or exercising, moving your body in one way or another, or cooking meals at home instead of eating out, controlling your shopping addiction if you have issues with shopping, like not succumbing to your desires in life, like your desires in life that are ultimately not making you healthier, happier, stronger, more responsible, etc. Not having discipline also makes you lose respect for yourself. And there is a point where you can have too much discipline and you end up living a horrible life because you're so hard on yourself that you have no room to make mistakes. You have no room to have an off day, or you don't get as much work done, or you don't get your, 30-minute walk in, or whatever your exercise routine is. Then you're miserable.
Drive
So
safe.
it's definitely important to have a healthy balance, but it is important to have a level of discipline. I have an episode about that. It came out a while ago, like a few months ago, but you can search it up. Discipline, anything goes. And there's a whole episode about discipline. Because I think that it is very important for self-esteem. And I found for me that I am the most confident in myself when I have a balance between being a good person in my day-to-day life to the best of my ability and constantly trying to become a better person, because there is no limit to that. But then simultaneously using discipline in my life so that I feel satisfied with what I'm getting done in my life.
Turn left.
And I'm doing the hard things on a day-to-day basis that ultimately long-term make my life better. Whether that's because I feel better because I'm taking care of my health, or I'm not stressed out because I'm getting work done on time, or I feel accomplished because I've been able to accomplish more because I've been more disciplined with my time, etc. And last but not least, it's really important to be aware of who you're spending your time with, because people who are not supportive of you, people who are judgmental of you, people who are not fully on your team will make you feel 50 times more insecure than your baseline. You could be doing everything else right,
Get ready
okay?
to turn
You being
left.
a good person, you have discipline with yourself. If you're hanging out with people who are not on your team,
Turn
who
left.
are judgmental of you, who do not accept you for who you are, for whatever reason, probably because of their own insecurity, it demolishes everything. The people that you spend your time with are so important, and they rub off on you more than you even realize. And a lot of times their beliefs become your beliefs without you even needing to. And if they're judgmental of you, then suddenly you become judgmental of yourself. So it's very important to be aware of how the people in your life impact your self-esteem, and be aware of whether or not they are ultimately on your team. And I've noticed huge differences in my confidence from not spending time with people who are judgmental in ways that are unfair. Like, Like, it's absolutely critical to have people in your life who can give you constructive criticism to make you a better person. That's critical. You don't want to have a bunch of yes men around you in your life who are like, everything that you do is perfect, you're awesome. It's like, no, everybody is flawed in one way or another, and it's very important to have people who can help you improve and be a better person. Critical, crucial, awesome, great. But people who are just judgmental of you for no fucking reason, like I've had people in my life who have just hated that I'm outgoing, that I'm social, that I like to talk to people. Just hated that about me. And it's like, okay, well, I got bad news for you. That is permanent. That is who I am as a person, okay? Being around someone, for years on end who doesn't like that I'm an outgoing person and judges that element of my personality, that over time just made me a shell of a human being because I was so used to being judged for my outgoing personality. And it's taken a while to build it back up after the fact. But
Keep
I have,
right, and then exit
because
right.
not having that person around anymore made me realize that me being outgoing and social
Exit
is actually
right.
one of my greatest strengths in life, in fact. And there was something about that person that just didn't like that about me. So be it. But I should have figured out sooner. No, I shouldn't have, because I didn't. It was part of my process. But in retrospect, I will never be close to somebody like that again, who does not appreciate my essence, who's judgmental of my essence. I think that fixing your self-esteem will naturally allow you to let things bounce off of you, Naturally, building self-esteem builds this protective aura around you that allows you to process criticism, that allows you to process hateful words in a way that isn't as personal. You just don't take it as personal. Okay, moving on. Next, somebody said, I don't know if I'm being dramatic or if my feelings are valid. I think that it is very important to reflect on your own feelings and emotions because there are moments when we're dramatic. There are moments when we overreact. I think it is very important to analyze your strong emotions because I don't think there's a human on this planet who doesn't overreact sometimes, who doesn't get dramatic sometimes. It's part of being human, it seems. I definitely can get dramatic, for sure. In fact, every time I make a joke about that to my friends or family or whoever I'm dating at the moment, it's always like, yes, yes, you can be very dramatic. Like, I am somebody who has a tendency to be dramatic, and I absolutely have to ask myself every time I'm having a dramatic or very emotional moment, what is happening here? And I think that it's interesting, some would argue that being dramatic is never necessary, that it's always better to keep things as calm and as rational as possible. But I personally don't think that this is possible for me. I mean, the older that I get, the more rational I become, the less dramatic I become, just because I'm starting to realize more and more that it's not worth my energy to get dramatic. But I think it is important to embrace your own natural reaction. If your natural reaction is to become a bit dramatic, to become very upset, I think to an extent, one should accept that about themselves. And maybe even at times appreciate that they're an emotional person. As long as the dramatic feelings are
Keep
not
right,
maybe
and then
harming
turn right.
others. Okay, so let me explain. I'm a very dramatic person. I know this about myself.
Turn right.
And in a lot of ways, I appreciate it about myself because it is a sign that I care about things. I'm deeply emotional. I'm deeply sensitive. Being dramatic is a part of that. I'm also somebody who hyperanalyzes things and overthinks everything. I'm very analytical about everything. And I think that that also makes me very dramatic because I have a tendency to obsess over things, and in a lot of ways, being very sensitive and being very analytical is a great thing. It actually makes my life richer in a lot of ways, but it also comes with feeling things much more vividly. So that can make me a bit dramatic.
Keep
The
left.
way that call my dad and start crying about it. I might write a scathing journal entry in my diary, like whatever. I will get dramatic about things. But when it comes to actually confronting the person who wronged me, I try my best to approach that as calmly and rationally as I possibly can. Why? Because I've just found throughout my life that that is how you have a productive conversation. And allowing myself to be dramatic in a safe space, you know, with my close friends or family, or by myself, allows me to get the explosive emotions out so that I can then confront the situation in a way that is productive. And a lot of times, you know, the things that I'm screaming about on the phone with my parents or in my journal are the exact same sentiments that I'm bringing up to the person who I'm upset with. But the difference is the tone. So here's my conclusion, okay? If you feel something, it's valid in a lot of ways. We might sometimes have feelings that are unfair, maybe, or inconsiderate, or overreactions. Like, yes, that happens. And it's important to be aware of that. But at the same time, if we feel something, it's valid because we feel it. Whether or not it's right, depends on many variables, okay? But I think that whenever we feel something, we should try our best to resolve it in a way that's productive. And so, I guess my advice is to allow yourself to be dramatic and to not gaslight yourself into thinking that you're overreacting, to accept the fact that you feel the way that you feel, and to tend to those feelings by analyzing them and talking about them with your close friends and family or therapist or whoever, and then to make a plan to resolve it. Sometimes the plan is to have a conversation with somebody else. Sometimes the plan is to write about it in a journal for a week straight. Depends on who you are, but it doesn't really matter if you're being dramatic or not. If you feel the way that you feel and it's negative, then you need to find a way to solve it. I think the worst thing that you can do, though, is to explode on someone. Now listen, it happens to all of us sometimes. Sometimes we can't hold in our feelings and we can't help it. We just have to confront in a way that's explosive. It happens to all of us sometimes. But I feel like you can never go wrong when you approach something confrontational with an air of rationale and calmness. Because even if maybe you did overreact about something, and what you are confronting them about is an overreaction, if you approach them with calmness, then you're going to be able to have a productive conversation about it where the other person doesn't feel attacked and they don't go on defense mode and they don't shut down. It's like this, okay? Let's say your significant other has been texting somebody that they're friends with and you're starting to get a hunch that it's becoming romantic, okay? Now you have no reason to believe this because they've never cheated on you before and they're just friends and they've always been friends, but you're just for some reason starting to get upset, feeling like there's something going on there. And you let this feeling sort of percolate until it becomes this explosive, angry situation. If you confront them in an explosive, angry way, they're gonna shut down and be like, what the fuck? Like, you don't trust me? Why don't you trust me? Like, why are you this angry at me? This is my friend. We've always been friends. Like, what's the issue? Whereas if things are brought up more rationally, just like, hey, you know, I know that this might be an overreaction. I'm not sure, but I'm feeling really uncomfortable by this. And I'm not sure if I'm overreacting. I'm not sure if I'm being dramatic, but I'm uncomfortable by it. So let's figure it out. Let's figure out a way to make me feel comfortable. In that situation, the partner's not feeling attacked and they're going to be like, oh my God, no, I'll show you all of our texts. Look, well, that's if they're a good significant other. If they're a bad one, then they're lying and they won't show you anything and they won't make you feel better. So yeah, hopefully that was valid advice. Okay, next, somebody said, how to overcome your ego when it is really loud. You know, this is kind of complicated because I feel like some people just naturally have larger egos, and stemming from that, they tend to be more competitive. They tend to be more vain. And I think to an extent, our ego is determined by nature. Like, you know, there's just some people who have bigger egos than others. say for the most part, I have a small to medium-sized ego naturally. Maybe a medium-sized ego to begin with, just baseline. Because I am a little bit competitive sometimes. I do like to win, at things sometimes. I can sometimes feel frustrated by criticism I get, but for the most part though, I'm pretty open to not being the best and not winning every competition, whether it's one in my head or it's actually a real competition of sorts. Like, I'm not the most competitive person in the world, and I don't know, I think I'm overall accepting of the fact that I am who I am, and I have things that I'm good at, things that I'm bad at, and blah blah blah. Now, the definition of ego is kind of complicated because when I think of ego, I think of cockiness and selfishness and self-importance in a way that's overly inflated, like it's a negative thing. But ego, if you look up the definition, is just a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. So, by definition, we should all have ego. Like, to not have ego would be to not have any self-esteem, any self-importance. And that's not good, right? Like, you definitely need to have a bit of ego. But I'm assuming that what you're talking about here is, like, how do I deal with having an ego that's inflated, that's too large? If your ego is at a healthy place, see, I'm all fucked up with this definition because I also use the word ego probably incorrectly a lot of times because, I'll be like, well, it's better to lead without ego when you're going into an argument, right? Because you want to be empathetic of the other person and you want to approach it in a humane, humble way in a way in order to have the best results. But again, you need to have some ego because if you, let's say, go into an argument or a confrontational conversation with no ego, then you'll just let the other person walk all over you. You have to have a little bit of self-esteem and a little bit of self-importance to stand up for what you believe in and make sure that you have communicated your side properly. So I've definitely in the past used ego wrong, I think. But anyhow, for the sake of this dilemma, we'll say that the ego in this case is overinflated, is too large, is harmful. It's at a harmful level. I'll rephrase the question. How to overcome ego when it's too big? How to shrink your ego a little bit? Now, in my experience, I feel like ego becomes inflated when one is insecure. And it's interesting because ego is one's self-esteem, one's sense of self-importance. So you would think like, okay, if somebody's feeling insecure and bad about themselves, how is their ego becoming inflated? But in my experience, someone's ego becomes inflated as a protection mechanism from feeling insecure. It's like having an inflated ego protects you from addressing the fact that you have low self-esteem. It's like an overcorrection in one's mind because somebody who's truly secure in themselves, somebody who truly has a solid, balanced self-esteem, a solid, balanced sense of self-importance that's rational. And again, I just keep using the word balance, but rational and balanced is someone who is aware of the duality of man. Okay? As humans, we're good and we're bad. We're talented and we're not talented. We're important and we're not important. And to be aware of that is to be at a healthy, balanced place with your ego. But to have an inflated ego is to be too insecure to accept the duality. And instead, you're like, no, I only want to believe that I am the good because addressing the bad makes me feel too bad about myself. I can't handle that. This is my experience anyway. And that's usually because you're running away from your own insecurity, sometimes without even realizing that you're doing it. When you're at a healthy place with your ego and it's balanced, it's not loud. It's not loud at all. It barely speaks in a way. You feel so much more comfortable in day-to-day life because you just accept life yourself for what it is, and you appreciate the good, and you are aware of and inspired to fix the bad on whatever timeline is most reasonable and doable, right? Your ego is quiet because
Keep
you're not
right,
afraid of doing
and then
something
exit
wrong.
right.
You're not afraid of making a mistake because
Alright.
you have come to terms with the fact that that is part of being human,
Exit right.
and that doesn't make you any less of a person necessarily. You're also not overvaluing your
Turn right.
achievements because you're also aware that although those things are great and something to be proud of, they're not necessarily the
Turn
most
right.
important thing. The most important thing is
Okay,
far
let's
deeper
find a new
than that.
route.
You know, it's more about what type of person you are and
I
whether or
made
not
a
you're constantly
mistake.
trying to be better to the best of your ability. Your ego gets loud when you're constantly trying to prove to yourself that you're good, that you're the best. The problem with that is now you feel like you don't have any room to make a mistake. You don't have any room to embarrass yourself. You don't have any room for fuck ups because in your mind, you're the best. And what you're telling the world is that you're the best. Not necessarily exactly that verbatim, but in one way or another, that is what you're trying to prove to yourself and the world on a day-to-day basis. So now anytime something happens that contradicts that, you're a mess. Your ego's screaming in your head like, no, that's not what we're doing. That's not what we're doing. Because you're living a false reality. When your ego is inflated, you're living a false reality. You think that you're more important and more awesome and more perfect than you are. And no one is that. So anytime something happens that sort of shakes that reality, you freak out and your ego screams in your ear. And it's like, well, you need to do better and you need to be better and you need to prove to everybody that you're better. And it makes you do things that are at times horrible, not only for yourself, but also for others. Like no one wants to be around it and you barely like living in that reality, right? Like it might make you treat others badly. You might, look down at others because you've convinced yourself that you are the best and that no one is up to your standard. That isolates you and ultimately it just makes you an unlikable person. You might overwork yourself and try to be an overachiever in a way that just destroys your quality of life because you're like, no, I need to prove that I'm, this very accomplished person and I need to live up to that. You might cheat your way through life to try to get to the top because you can't stand the idea of not being at the top. There's many, many more things that can come from a inflated ego, but I think that my biggest piece of advice is to really work on fixing your self-esteem. And that sort of goes back to the first thing that we discussed. How do I stop taking everything so personally? Does this stem from insecurity? It's sort of the same piece of advice. It's like work on becoming the best possible person you could be. Treat everyone equally, regardless of how accomplished they are, or whether or not you think that they're smart, or whether or not you think that they're cool. Treat everyone equally. Treat everyone with respect and kindness. Be generous in ways that you feel comfortable with. Like work on becoming a really, really good person, a morally good person. Spend time with people who make you feel grounded and who accept you for who you are, your flaws included. Have